For this problem, if you look on the left, we're given a table, and the first thing they ask us to do is to add a cumulative relative frequency column. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll look at the actual problems themselves. But if you look at the top right, all I've done is copy over all this data. I didn't change the order of anything. All I did was copy it. And in order to get the cumulative frequency, what we need to do is basically add up every row before the row that we're looking at. So right now we have 145. There's no previous rows, so we're just going to write 145. But then what we want to do is we want to add 58 to 145. So that would give us 203. Then we just add the other 20. That'll be 223. We add 10, 233. We're just adding this row to the total value that we have. We're just accumulating. You can think of it as like a snowball. You start here and you just grow bigger and bigger because we're gathering up all the data that we have. So here we're adding another 5. That'll be 238. Add another 3, 241. 240. Adding 2 here, 243. Adding 1, 244. Adding 3, 247. Adding 2, 249, and then finally we have 250. So the total amount of data points that we have is 250 if we add everything here up. So now in order to get the cumulative relative frequency, we need to figure out what each of these numbers is as a percentage out of 250. So what percent of the total number of data points is represented by just this row right here? And to do that, all we need to do is take 145 and divide it by whatever our total is. Right here we have 250. That's 0.58. And it's worth noting that this is a percentage. So what we want to do is we want to multiply it by 100, and that will give us 58%. So now we can write in that we have 58%. And then we just need to do the same thing over again with this value. Instead of writing 145, we're going to have 203. All we're doing is really saying, okay, once we've gotten to this point, how much of our total data are we representing? And then we say, okay, now that we're at this point, what percentage of our total data are we representing now? And so forth. We keep asking that question over and over again until we eventually get all the way here, and we'll have represented 100% of the data that we have. So here we have 203. We're just going to take that 203 and divide into 250, and that will get 0.812. So here we could just write 81.2%. Then we look at our next value, 223. 223 divided by 250. That is going to be 0.892. And if you multiply that by 100, you get 89.2%. 89.2%. Now we're going to do 233 out of 250. That is going to give us 0.932. So now we have represented 93.2% of our data. And you can see as we gather more and more data, we start with 145, then we add 58, then 20, then 10. We're just getting a larger and larger percent of our overall data. And it should always add up to 100%. If it does not add up to 100%, then you must have done something wrong in your calculations. So now that we've filled out that table, we can actually look at the question. What percent of completed projects had a capital value of at most 250 million pounds? Well, when they say at most 250 million pounds, we cut off all the data that is below this line here. And the answer is very simply right here, 95.2%. That means 95.2% of all of the projects we have out of all 250 projects, 95.2% of them had a capital value of less than 250 million pounds. Now looking at problem number B, what percent of completed projects had capital values exceeding 450 million pounds? We go up to 450 million pounds and we could draw a line again. And we said we're looking for the projects that exceed 450 million pounds. So we're going to ignore everything above this line. But what we can see is that we're actually excluding 98.8% of the data, right? Because all of this data adds up to 98.8%. So we're excluding all that data when we're only looking at these categories right here. So if we exclude that from the total 100%, we can get 98.8. We subtract that from 100, and that will give us 1.2%, which means that this represents 1.2% of all the data. Another way you can come to that same answer is if you say, okay, this is the data that we're looking at. So we have one data point and two data points. So we just add those together, and that will give us 3 data points. out of our overall total number of projects, which we know to be 250. So if we take 3 divided by 250, that will give us 0.012, and again, remember, we need to multiply by 100, at which point we'll have 1.2%. And once again, we have the same answer. Now we're looking at C, how many completed projects had a capital value between 301 and 500 million pounds? And it's not even asking for a percentage anymore. All they're asking is how many completed projects. So 301 up to 500 million, that includes all of these here. So we have 2, 1, 3, and 2. So it's going to be 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2. And that is going to be a total of 8 projects. And if you wanted to know what that was as a percentage, again, we could just divide 8 into 250, and then that would give us 0.032, which we need to multiply by 100, and then that will give us 3.2%. So if somebody were to ask you what percent of projects have a capital value between 301 and 500 million pounds, the answer is 3.2%.